Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to test and make sure that we can be heard in the Zoom webinar so that we can begin on time at 1:30. So,
yes, you're coming through loud and clear in Zoom. Thank you very much, Sam.
Great, terrific. Thank you, Matthew. Chair Crandall will be able to begin on time.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's definite. All
I'm gonna
right.
keep mine short.
We're at-
He's gonna get into the meat of it.
Welcome back, everyone, from our break here. We are at little past 1:30, but we're still on time somewhat, and we're going to go ahead and continue where we left off and move forward from there. And we were at a presentation by the appellant, and I think, sir, you were going to speak at that time.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Shall I get started?
Yes, I think we're ready. And just another note before we continue further, it seems to be less people, so we'll go ahead and continue with the 3 minutes rather than the 2. Before we've seen so many people, I didn't know if we were going to get through it, but we're good to go. So go ahead, sir. You can go ahead and start when you're ready. Oh, yeah. Do we need to conduct another swear-in, or we're still good from the other one?
You'd only have to swear in people who haven't already been sworn.
Okay.
Everyone else is fine.
Is there anyone that hasn't sworn in yet that wants to speak on this item or is a part of this item? Anybody on Zoom? And not seeing any, so I think it looks like we're all good. Oh, they did? Oh. Okay, there's someone online. And it says Colleen.
Yep, that's me. I want to be,
Sworn in?
yeah, well, I did in the morning, but I don't know if you.
Oh,
want
if
to
you
do
did
it
in the
again.
morning, you're good to
I
go.
can- I'd be happily to do that.
Yeah, if you did in the morning, it counts.
All right.
All right. Thank you. All right. And so anything else before we continue forward? All right. It's all you.
Thank you, Supervisors, and thank you for the opportunity to present our appeal to you. My name is Jonathan Dharmapalan. I'm a co-owner of Monte Cristo Vineyards with Jacqueline. And I can't outdo her. She did a nice presentation today, but I'll add some color to the journey we've taken to get here. We have always approached our work here in Lake County and our wonderful family vineyard as a project in land stewardship. So even before sustainable farming was considered sort of a popular item, we actually developed this project with the idea of having a sustainable, long-lasting stewardship type of project. Even in 1999, we reserved close to 80% of the project for natural habitat. Most of that reservation is still held as a reservation. Our vineyards were drip irrigated, as will any other plantings we do. It's the most efficient way to get water to plants. We have practiced sustainable farming and were formally a California Sustainable Farm and a Lodi Sustainable Farm as of 2015. We have worked tirelessly to preserve water. All of our wells are metered. We count every drop of water that's pumped out of the wells. We only pump what we need for the next day. We manage it very, very tightly to meet the requirements of being a certified farm. We also monitor very carefully the depths of the wells, the standing water in the wells, the recharge rate. Every single well is monitored, and we manage water very carefully. This is for us a part of being a steward of the land. We have a pond on the property, on the vineyard, which we have lined to again preserve and watch for water. And lastly, we're very, very proud to say that we have recently installed solar energy, producing about 43.5 kilowatts of power. Should be sufficient, maybe even a little extra, pumping back into the grid. I'm very proud of having been able to do that. We have wild deer and bear living on the property. Jacqueline talked about our deer crossings. We put those in now 23 years ago. The deers do cross across those crossings. The migration paths are not hindered. The bear, of course, come and go as they like. They don't wait for anyone's permission. So sustainable farming has been important to us. And I'll just quickly point out that in addition to managing water, we file for business management evaluations, soil management evaluations under sustainable farming, ecosystem management evaluations, and pest management evaluations. All of our fertilization is now done through composting. We purchase our compost locally from the same compost facility in Lower Lake, and we actually spread almost 700 tons of compost into the vineyard. So replenishing the vineyard in the most natural way possible is important for us. That happens to be our solar panels that just went in. They're nice and shiny. Fire safety is a real activity for us. We work with CAL FIRE and North Shore Fire to do annual inspections. We create fire breaks and work on fuel reduction. We have actually recently completed a fuel reduction project with Mike Ciancio and Captain Brian Bartko, and the Hogback Ridge crews were on our property helping us with fuel reduction. And you'll see in a little while that these wildfires are very serious problems for us. After the 2018 wildfire, we actually put in a pad for CAL FIRE helicopters to land. The fire that came across in 2018 came up from Mendocino from the northeast. It was heading from the northwest and heading essentially southeast. Fire crews were on our property because it's a natural fire break and an easy access on the ridge top. This happens to be CAL FIRE who needed water. Yes, the lake is close by, but the fire was raging at 50 miles per hour. They didn't have time to go back to the lake to get water. So this is CAL FIRE in our pond getting water to put the fire out. They were successful in putting that fire out as it approached us and approached our neighbors. We have been told that had that fire not been stopped, we could have put in peril Clear Lake Oaks and Glen Haven, because that's where it was headed. So fire management is important for us, and we partner with not just CAL FIRE and North Shore Fire, but also with PG&E. PG&E clears under their high tensile lines. They have 24/7 access to our property. We have fire locks on all of the gates. We have PG&E locks on all of the gates, and they come and go as they want, and we partner with them actively. A quick word about the application for this permit. We started this process 2 years and a couple of months ago. The process started, as some of you know, with the State Water Resources Control Board signing off on the project. We conducted biological assessments, cultural assessments, well testing by Power Services, all of which, by the way, were done by independent licensed professionals. Natural Investigations Company is not a company that we work with on anything else. We have no other relationship except to get this job done. Flaherty Cultural Resources did the cultural resources assessment, reconnaissance. Well tests were done by Power Services. We have no relationship with Power Services except to bring them in to do the well tests. Those well tests were then submitted for the application and for the hydrology study. We went through Department of Fish and Wildlife, Realm Engineering, again, a company we have no other relationship except for the hydrological study to be conducted. There are licensed engineers supplied that study. We went through CEQA review process, and as mentioned earlier, county staff recommended this project to the Planning Commission. I won't spend much time on this except to point out that we did get a vote, 3 in favor, 1 not during the process, and I suppose is the reason why we are here before the Board of Supervisors.
I think you meant 2 in favor.
2 in favor, 1 not, yeah. Sorry. We view this application as coming under really several ordinances and acts. As a farm, we comply under the Right to Farm Act, State of California law, Lake County's Right to Farm Ordinance, and we have complied completely with the Lake County Cannabis Ordinances and amendments. We take this very seriously. We have met all the requirements of the ordinance. We have supplied the county with everything that's been requested. And we know that mitigations have been recommended as part of this, and we will comply completely with those mitigated requirements. One last point I'd like to make before I hand this over to Trey. There are some complaints that we have received over the course of this application. Jacqueline pointed out that in the 23 years we were farming, we never once received a complaint up until the time that this application got started. We have written support for this project from our neighbors to the west, neighbors to the north, and several neighbors to the east. To the south of us, we essentially have a 240-acre buffer zone with no residential properties in that 240 acres. Most of that 240 acres happens to also be our acreage, and we continue to preserve that as a buffer zone. We have always preserved it as a buffer zone, and will continue to preserve it as a buffer zone. 240 acres is a pretty significant buffer zone between us and our neighbors. Jacqueline mentioned, and others have mentioned, that the proposed planting areas are as far west and as far away from any other residential properties that we know of, and I think that has already been discussed. With that, I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Trey Sherrill, who will talk specifics and numbers and some facts and figures.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Trey Sherrill. I'm here representing Monte Cristo Vineyards. On this side, you can see the distances to neighboring residences. It's almost a mile to the residence of Cerrito Drive from the nearest proposed cannabis-related activity. Thousands of feet to the nearest neighbors to the south. And not only thousands of feet, there's hundreds of feet in elevation difference. The proposed cultivation areas will be much higher in elevation than the surrounding residences, so no one's going to be sitting on their porch looking down on a cannabis farm. As mentioned earlier today, there are currently approximately 128 acres of existing vineyard on the property, with an estimated annual water use requirement of approximately 85 acre-feet. We get that estimate based on a vineyard water use study in Lake County, California, prepared by the University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources Department. To develop the 22-acre cannabis cultivation operation, 40 acres of vineyard would need to be removed. The reason why 40 acres need to be removed for 22 acres of cannabis is due to property line setbacks, as well as setbacks from watercourses, which both the property and the watercourse setbacks are not required of vineyard cultivation. Vineyard cultivation go right up to the high water mark of these watercourses, where cannabis cultivation and property line, whereas cannabis cultivation would have to be set back 100 feet, and that's the difference right there. Additionally, Monte Cristo Vineyards proposes to remove 18 additional acres of vines from production to offset the water usage of the proposed cannabis cultivation operation. So if we take in total 58 acres of vines would be removed and 22 acres of cannabis cultivation area would be added, but only 14 acres during the current drought emergency. The Lake County Community Development Department is using an estimate of 1 2/3 acre-feet per acre of cannabis, and as previously discussed, vineyard cultivation in Lake County of this sort uses approximately 2/3 of acre foot. So if you subtract 58 acres of vineyard, you add 22 acres of cannabis, there's more or less a balance in water usage, estimated water usage on the property.
If I may ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
I don't know if your next slide says this, but the comparison between drought management plan and your normal standard plan? What's the water usage for?
I do not have that, but I can definitely give you that answer. I can calculate that up really quickly. But there would absolutely be a net reduction in water usage on the property. And I'd like to point out that under current vineyard cultivation, there is no drought management plan associated with that. Therefore, there's nothing to compel any. The Monte Cristo vineyards would reduce water use in drought and has reduced water use of their vineyard during droughts, but there's nothing that would compel them to do so without approval of this major use permit. Whereas with approval of the major use permit, they are compelled to implement a drought management plan, which would force measures to reduce water usage on the property. I'd also like to note that there's no tree removal or grading would be needed to establish the proposed cannabis cultivation areas, as they would be established within the existing footprint of the existing vineyard blocks. As you are probably aware, there is a small but influential group that is opposed to the Monte Cristo vineyard conversion. Among general complaints in opposition to agricultural operations on Monte Cristo Vineyard's property, they have also challenged the county's environmental review process regarding the proposed cannabis project. To start with, crop conversions from one agricultural product to another, in this case from vineyard cultivation to cannabis cultivation, are generally categorically exempt from CEQA review. The reason that Monte Cristo Vineyard's major use permit application is not exempt from CEQA review is due to the proposed structures, a proposed processing facility, and 2 greenhouses. Additionally, the opposition has indicated that they believe that there is a conflict of interest in having land use applicants hire California licensed professionals to prepare hydrology studies for their projects, despite it being a requirement of Ordinance 3106. And I can assure you that Monte Cristo Vineyard's hydrology report and drought management plan were prepared in accordance with the requirements of this ordinance. Additionally, they have challenged the analysis provided in the hydrology study, asserting that the analysis provided was that of an unconfined alluvial plain aquifer, despite it being explicitly stated that the aquifers of the property are confined fractured bedrock aquifers, as they have insisted, which corresponds. Finally, they have also indicated that the hydrology report is insufficient because it was more concerned with a well off of Cerrito Drive than the wells on the slopes south of the property. And the reason for this is that the well on Cerrito Drive it basically boils down to gravity. The well on Cerrito Drive is slightly higher in elevation. Therefore, when you're trying to analyze the effects, if the well is lower, it's gonna have a harder time for it, and the next slide will kind of correlate that. So this is a slide for a well at 10750 Pingree Road, as well as the well that's closest to that well. And that the information in this slide is derived from the well completion reports, both for the top right is the well completion report for the well that's closest to the Pingree Road address, and the bottom right is the well completion report for the Pingree Road address. Notice that there's almost half a mile of distance in between these, and not only is there half a mile of distance, but there's quite a bit of elevation distance. What I'm trying to convey here is that basically water rolls downhill, essentially. And so therefore, if the Monte Cristo well is higher than neighboring wells, then there's no way that they could impact those directly. They can allege some indirect impacts, but that's a shared water resource of the shared aquifer that is that entire mountain, and that would be. And then there's other things that are alleged as far as drought related, that we go back to. There will be no increase in water usage on the property. Therefore, we can't say that there would be any additional impacts. And I'm happy to elaborate on that if there's any questions. Finally, the water resource protections that they want are standard conditions for approval. As you can see from these conditions of approval on the right, they want monitoring. They want monitoring both of the water levels in their wells as well as the volume of water coming out of their wells. The status quo, the Monte Cristo Vineyards is monitoring all of that, but there's nothing compelling them to share or make public this information currently with the vineyard. With cannabis, all of a sudden, these things they would be compelled to do so. If the major use permit is not approved, then this information will continue to be theirs. Additionally, we talk about there's concerns about traffic and the number of employees and things of that nature. To start with, right now, they harvest 128 acres of vineyards all in the month of September. That's going to go down to 70 acres, so there will be a net reduction. Currently that's the peak number of employees. That's the peak number of vehicle trips on their roads is in September during the harvest. That number is going to be reduced just because they're reducing from 128 acres of vines to 70. There would be, as you can see on this bar graph here, there would be an increase in the number of trips in October, November, and December because those are the months where harvesting and processing of cannabis would occur. But as you can see that those trips are much lower in the course. The peak is going down, basically. The number of trips throughout the year is relatively the same, slightly higher. We're talking about less than 10% higher, but the peak is less than 20, or more than 20% lower as far as the peak number of trips.
I can wrap it up for you. When we think about this property, again, we try to think about it holistically. We have been managing it as a pure vineyard up until now. I forgot to mention earlier that in 2018, we lost 100% of our fruit. It was a very painful experience due to the smoke damage. So it got us thinking about how to diversify, how to come at this vineyard as a more holistic approach. We thought very carefully about our options. Cannabis was an option, and so we've been working on this quite diligently for the past 4 years, and certainly for the last 2 years we have been thinking through what this means, not just for us, but for the future, and for the future of our children and the coming generations. A topic that has come up, and we've been watching this concern, not just in this county, but across California, is food. Food security. It has been suggested that we could use the infrastructure we have to produce food. We have been exploring that as an active effort that we can certainly take advantage of, especially in the winter months. Growing wintergreens, root vegetables, onions. We have been exploring working with Farm to Families, which is a project that has been ongoing since 2004 to direct our produce back towards Lake County, to the local county, and to take advantage of their infrastructure to make this effective. We think that this will play well in our strategy for diversification, and this is something we wish and our children wish. Our children, our oldest daughter, is working through this particular issue. So this diversification doesn't stop with cannabis. It continues on to build a property that will be useful and beneficial to us and to those around us. With that, I will stop, and thank you very much, Supervisors, for taking the time to listen to us.
Any questions from the board, or open it up to public, or?
I have a couple quick
Go ahead.
questions. Appreciate the presentations that we've received on this. I do have some questions. There was a lot of letters, went through the letters and then went through the materials, and I couldn't really put my finger on some of the stuff. In the conditions of approval, I think it's just kind of a constant. It says you got to meet 4290. What does that mean specifically to this project? Does that mean that we'll see gravel added onto the dirt roads. There was a lot of complaints about dust, and I did go on the property and I did look at the project or the potential project, and it is a dirt road. Couldn't really tell you if there was a lot of dust behind us, but obviously it depends the conditions. Is the road going to be upgraded? Is it going to be kept the same? I know there's additions of buildings, and I know 4290 does count buildings at one point or another, so I'm curious what exactly is the plan for that.
Yeah, generally speaking, compliance with 4290, 4291, or 4292 rules would require a aggregate road surface that is capable of supporting 75,000-pound fire apparatus, fire vehicles. What that generally means is gravel 3 to 6 inches deep. That is going to be specific to the section of road from El Cerrito to the proposed buildings. It would not extend beyond their proposed buildings, but beyond the proposed buildings is all Monte Cristo Vineyard property anyways. And so the other requirements of 4290 is roadway width and things of that nature, but their roads already meet those standards, so we're just talking about the application of gravel. But in addition, when it comes to in the conditions of approval, there are requirements for how dust should be suppressed, and we're talking about those requirements would only be enforceable if the major use permit is approved. If it is not, under current conditions, because of the Right to Farm Act and the Right to Farm Ordinance, the current activities are protected. There would be no need to apply gravel. There would be no need to apply dust suppression. But if the major use permit is approved, then there are requirements that would require dust suppression.
Okay. I do want to point out, I appreciate, this is one of the first times that I've read a drought emergency plan where there's an actual planned reduction. I can't believe it's the first one I've seen that has that, but I appreciate that. However, I don't see it in the conditions of approval that they shall commit to their drought emergency plan during the duration of the drought emergency. So I know that if this does move forward, that's something that I feel needs to be added. That way, it's not just a document that we receive that feels good. It's something that we're saying, this is what you are going to do, not just the potential of you doing it out of the kindness of your heart. I know that traffic came up. I think that a lot of the traffic, unfortunately, was on High Valley, was the majority of the comments, or at least for the major things, like the jackknifing. And I don't know that a jackknife would occur from turning on Cerrito. It doesn't feel like it has that same turn radius as if you're coming down High Valley from the actual valley. But traffic is one of those things that I'm unsure about because I will put this on us. The road sucks out there. And we need to do a better job. We're striving to change that here as a board, but that's something that is definitely on top of mind, and that's something that we need to work on and fix. And I'd hate to use that as a strike against the applicant, but it's definitely something that I'd be curious how we make that better, especially since there is that traffic coming in and coming out, and they're not coming every hour of the day. They're all probably coming in early in the morning and all leaving in the close to late afternoon. So it's a constant traffic during those time periods. So that is definitely my one concern of how can we make that better. And I don't know if I'm asking that question to us or the applicant, and I don't think that they should be fixing our roads. That's our job. Anyways, I just wanted to put those out there. Those are the three things that came out: traffic, dust, and then the conditions of approval with the drought mitigation plan added in.
And I think too, just briefly before I call on Supervisor Green to move forward, I just wanted to ask, because I wasn't real clear, when I came up to visit, I asked about some witness wells, and I think you explained it to me. I just don't understand if I grasped it. I don't know if I grasped it properly. So I don't know if you can explain how that would work out, or how.
You can take it. So right now, they currently have pneumatic meters on the wells so that they can monitor the water levels in the wells. They work by forcing air down the line. The more pressure that is exerted to force a bubble out of the tube, the more water there is above the bottom, above that tube, and that tube is at the bottom. And the purpose of this is to monitor the water level in the wells. As I was trying to show, and I apologize, I kind of jumped over it, but they're on top of a ridgeline. Their water resources it's more important to them than anyone to manage their water resources and to make sure that they have sufficient amount of water for their vineyard now and then for their vineyard and proposed cannabis cultivation operation. And therefore, so monitoring the water level, monitoring the water that comes out of the wells, all the water out of the wells goes into the reservoir at the top of the hill, that she showed the video of, or we showed the video of. And so it's all monitored. They're already doing all of this now because it's important to them. It's vital to their business, and it will be vital in the future. It's just right now, sharing that information, nothing's compelling them to share that information with anyone.
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, just point of clarification, and this question is probably for Byron. And just clarification for the two people presenting here. Trey, I know you very well, but your role here as a consultant and maybe for the project and maybe some of your previous work experience. You've worked on other projects in Lake County, so if you could document that. The specific question for Byron, I think I showed you before the break, is on page 32 of the initial study under subdivision A, and it looks like there's a typo in there, and the typo was referenced in a couple of the comment letters. So whether it's Byron for LACO on behalf of CDD, or if CDD wants to pick that up, since we are going to be, there are proposed findings for the initial study, if there's anything we can fix on that to clarify that, I'd certainly appreciate that.
There's a remnant of a comment that remained in the draft, and it should be redacted, removed, where it says reserved.
So the highlighted area and the bracketed word behind it reverse?
Yeah.
So the proposal would be, if adopted, that sentence and the word would be redacted? Thank you for that clarification. And Trey, just, if you can just give me the 30-second elevator speech of your CV, I certainly would appreciate it.
I'll start. I have a bachelor's degree in environmental science. Is this what you're referring to? I have a bachelor's degree in environmental science, a master's degree in forest hydrology. I worked for the California Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board for approximately 5 years. I worked in both the timber unit and then also worked in the WET team, the watershed enforcement team. And then drafted the original Cannabis General Order. The original Cannabis General Order became the, quote, water board permit that all cannabis farmers have to adhere to and be enrollment with at this point in the state of California. In 2017, I left the water board and began consulting to cannabis farmers, helping them obtain permits and licenses and comply with those permits and licenses.
All right. Supervisor Sabatier?
I will make one final comment, and this was alluded to in the presentation by the appellant. There were some terms and some words shared in the letters that I hope we don't have to listen to today. There's a lot of property owners that have signed who don't live here, and I want to respect those property owners for owning property in our county just as much. I want to respect any worker that comes into the county to work or anyone who wants to conduct business in this county that don't live here. The appellants do live here. They have a house on the property. Maybe they also live in other places. Just because somebody has a secondary home does not mean that they are an outsider, and I sure hope that we will become a little bit more welcoming in the future. I did not like some of the words that I read, and I hope that I won't be hearing those words today.
Right. Not hearing anything else from the board, we'll go ahead and open public input at this time, and I'll go ahead and, once you state your name for the record, I'll do the 3 minutes. So I'll start the timer, and we'll go from there. And I know, too, that a gentleman had asked possibly if he can speak for someone else. After everybody gets through, I'll give him a couple, about a minute or so to do so. I think Randy, right? Troublemaker. All right, so anyone that, from the public that'd like to speak, come on up. Did you want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Andrew Amelong. I'm the Cannabis Program Manager. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this better? All right. My name is Andrew Amelong. I'm the Cannabis Program Manager. I do want to address one issue that came to my attention this morning. I apologize, it came up on Friday. As far as the letters being submitted correctly to the board, there were some concerns because we had multiple letters and multiple comments coming from different directions to different recipients. And some of our commenters who are coming up, they submitted another letter on Friday pointing out that some of the original letters were not included and uploaded in the original attachment. And it was also decided upon by staff that we weren't necessarily going to compile them all into a single document. But with that said, when it came to my attention, there were some concerns about letters not making it to the board. We did a full audit of all of the Planning Commission hearing comments and letters, as well as what was uploaded on Friday to the Board of Supervisors. And there were 9 additional comments or letters that were sent in for this hearing today. However, there was 1 letter from the Planning Commission hearing against the project that was not included in the attachment, so I wanted to make sure you had it. I can paraphrase the concerns. It's from Ken Humphrey. They're concerned about dust, noise, truck speeds, water use, drought, and cannabis tax relief. And here are copies of this letter for all of you.
So is that a different letter from
It was
Mr.
just,
Humphrey?
it wasn't uploaded on Friday.
Because I know I saw a letter from Mr. Humphreys in there.
Okay, it could have been. Part of the confusion was there were a lot of duplicates.
And there was a stack of letters rather than
there were a lot
just
of
individual.
duplicates and a lot of started documents of combined letters. Plus, at the original Planning Commission hearing, a lot of the letters we received came in after we had already uploaded our public comments, so they were green sheeted to the Planning Commission and kept in a separate folder. But with the addition of this letter, you have all comments that were sent in. So, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. All right. I have some hands up online. I can go from them unless there's someone that wants to come to the microphone.
Is there a sign-in sheet here? A sign-in sheet?
No,
Okay.
Yeah, you just state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Chuck Lamb. I'm from Clear Lake Oaks. And a few things I want to talk about. One is, first item is water. We have a well on a property that's 2 parcels down from the ridge line on the south slope of the hill on the side of Monte Cristo. And our well is roughly lateral with another well from Jim and Olga Steele. We both, and I'll let, of course, Jim speak for himself on that. I have real concerns about the ability of that well to recharge and to maintain its supply of water. I appreciate the applicant, Mr. Sherrill, talking about showing these fancy graphs and everything, how wonderful the water is going to be taken care of going over the slope and so forth, but we don't know that. To the best of my knowledge, I believe that my well is in the sphere of influence of the aquifer and it has not been tested. If it has been tested, I'm not aware of it. They did it without my knowledge or without my permission, so I'm not sure. I just want to mention that I have concerns on that. As far as the hydrologists are concerned, I would really like to see the county move the hydrologists into the county so the county appoints the hydrologists, not the applicants. By doing so, you eliminate conflict of interest, you eliminate the possibility of corruption, and I'm not suggesting that's what we have here, but what you want to do is you want to eliminate that. And the way to do that is by having the county control the hydrology reports. Not a difficult thing to do. And the other thing relative to the hydrology report is the well testing was done in February, in the middle of the rainy season. You know, my weather station on my house, which is probably 1,000 feet below Monte Cristo, recorded 8.71 inches of rain from November to February. February 2021 is when the well tests were made. Why don't we do well testing during the driest time of the year, when the water demand is the most for not only grapes, but for marijuana? I don't understand. I'm not a hydrologist, but to me, logically, it says we shouldn't be doing this, well testing during the rainy season. As far as the neighborhood is concerned, my wife Holly and myself are not residents of the neighborhoods in Cerritos and Alta Vista. However, we are community members, and as such, we have a very strong feeling about our community and the neighborhoods within, okay? We are constantly trying, and there's several of us here in this audience that are constantly trying to improve the neighborhoods in our communities. We don't want to regress. We don't want to go backwards. We want to go forward. So that, in this particular case, is you want to eliminate the risks. You don't want to add risks. Wildfire?
So if we could wrap up, I can let you go after everyone goes, but yeah, the 3
I'm sorry?
minutes. The 3 minutes have come up, but I can let you wrap up, and if you wanted to come back up afterwards, after everyone gets their chance to speak, we can do that too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll come back afterwards then. Is that okay?
Yeah. All right.
I don't quite know how that happened.
I have some hands up online. I can go to them briefly.
Everybody wants me to go. I'm sorry. I'm being pushed out of my chair. Supervisors and staff, for the record, Jim Steele. I've got an extensive letter on file, and I hope you've all read it. I've written it. You read it. This project, is one that's very similar to just about 6,000 secret documents that I've read when I was professionally employed to do so. And I've seen all of the different misdirections that actually come up. They're misdirections not on purpose, but for not the purpose of the actual analysis on the key items. And therefore, we've come up with cumulative effects evaluations which have been missed because there's been all of this other noise in the system. I've tried to be very specific to one item, and that's the water. Lake County is in an intercoastal range aquifer system with 3 different aquifers that occur here. And you need to know something about each individual aquifer type, and then where the aquifer occurs, and then something about the particular recharge rate, how it might affect other people, which is not straight line and is not by elevation. One of the things that I heard were some credentials, and I thought maybe it's important to review some of mine, just to throw them out there. Obviously, I was a former elected county supervisor, but before that, I was a consultant to the county on their lake and their aquatic resources. I'm a retired chief of the aquatic biologist for Department of Fish and Game, a forest ecology for them as well, California Registered Professional Forester, and a California Association of Professional Scientists, a freshwater ecosystem consultant even today, and a former adjunct professor for freshwater ecology at Sac State, and I taught with regard to freshwater ecology, groundwater. And groundwater has a very specific role within freshwater ecology, whether it's on the surface water or somebody's using it, pulling it out. The same kind of analyses that I saw here were the kinds of analyses I saw and used in the Central Valley in order for one farmer to say, I'm not affecting your farm on the other side. All of this showed that the wells were not affecting each other while the entire system collapsed. And that was a big lesson for everybody. And you can look into Professor Yount's work at UC Davis and all of that. But over the years, when I was the president of the American Fisheries Society, we had these people come in to actually give those kinds of analyses saying, look, you guys have got to look at your groundwater differently because it affects the surface water and it affects the livelihood of a lot of surface species, but people don't seem to understand it. So here, there is some misunderstanding of what I'm hearing based on what I know. It's not necessarily that I'm an expert or know enough to say, but I do know there's not enough information to be able to say that this is not going to be harming the groundwater. So let's put that on the table a little bit. First off, as far as downslope, if we're in the same aquifer, and I believe we are, I have watched the well that we have downslope of the High Valley go from artesian style well, where we went down 300 feet to actually hit a confined aquifer, and the water came back up the well. Came back up the well to within a few feet of the top, and we had very low pumping pressures, and that was nice. Over the years, as the drought progressed, and as High Valley progressed with the implanting of grapes and vineyards and all these folks coming in here, I've watched that artesian effect go right on down. And it's just almost, you can't believe how much it's had an effect. I was stunned. We have an artesian well on the property next door. They used to flow all the time. It was on Spring Valley Road, and so it was a spring, and it's an artesian style. It doesn't flow anymore. And this is just kind of the classic thing that happens over drought and overuse, that these things start to dry down. Now, we're having plenty of water. We're okay. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking we're not necessarily going to be okay in all of the conditions, and we have a climate change scenario right now where we're not guaranteed the same kind of replenishment we have in the past. And so the last few years has been a little bit of a surprise and a wake-up call for everybody. And if you look at the history of climate here in this, and we're really in a desert region, if you look at that, there was about 1,000 years ago an extreme drought in this particular area, where the native tribes actually had to change their conditions. So with all that said, there's cumulative effects is one of the issues within Lake County, and we're not addressing it properly. I would really like to see us go back and say, look, we don't have the ability to actually address some of these water issues, and if we did, I think that we would start pulling back on some of the projects. And I'm not just talking about the cannabis project, and I believe these people are sincere, but here's the thing. If you're going to do this, you've got to divorce yourself from all of the emotion and all of the appeals to emotion that is going on here, but you've got to do this. You've got to say the grapes, the area, the community, all that needs to be looked at as primary. And these people are coming in and increasing or making an effect to the folks that are already here, or else you're going to have a significant effect going forward. And I don't want it to be in our area. I don't want it to be in our county. And our county is unique amongst all counties. So with that, if I come back up later and somebody asks me a question, I've got lots here, and I hope you read it. And I was hoping for questions about what I put in, because there's some significant issues going on, not just with this project. And bless them for having a project. They're trying to do something. It's with the county. And this particular region is extremely sensitive to water. And downslope is just as sensitive, if not more so, than upslope. Because there they see it. We're going to get it. We're never going to have a recovery. So that's the problem with it. So I would say this one needs to be denied and go back to planning and fix some of these issues, just because it should be done that way in the county.
Thank you. So let's see. Is there someone else in the chambers, or should I go on to the Zoom briefly? Right.
I'll do it.
Okay.
I don't know, some people may feel intimidated maybe to come forth. I am Pamela Kaczynski. I'm a resident, full-time resident of Clear Lake Oaks. I am Vice President of the North Shore Fire Fund, which is a nonprofit in support of the North Shore Fire Protection District. I am founder and leader of my Firewise community. I'm also a certified tourism ambassador for Lake County. I'm on the board member of the East Region Town Hall, where many residents have been coming forth to express their concerns about this project, and may, as I said, may not feel comfortable coming forth in these chambers to speak publicly on record. So perhaps I can express something on their behalf. Like the agenda items earlier today on the Risk Reduction Authority and on tourism, those are the things that I'm focused on: fire safety, community, and tourism. There are many of us who work tirelessly to protect the lake, the environment, and the economy. There have been 17 applications for commercial cannabis just in our small town of Clear Lake Oaks. 111 cannabis grows have been approved already for Lake County, with another 127 more in process. To me, location of cannabis is critical. As a member of the Earth Board, I attended the actual property tour in May of the Monte Cristo property. As a person who's retired, I am concerned and fight each day to combat unwanted growth in my neighborhood and that threatens my peace and enjoyment of why we moved to Lake County. And that can come from several factors. I know it's difficult to balance taxes, business growth, and residents. I'm asking the board to uphold the Vision 2028 and protect our residents and serve them well. I appreciate all the environmental and aspects of looking after wildlife and deer, absolutely. But I'm concerned in some situation residents may be the new endangered species. Thank you for consideration, and my full letter is in your packet.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Frances Novak, and I have adjoining property to the proposed project. It's basically not a good fit. It's a nuisance where we live to our neighborhood. I cannot imagine what it would be like when 72 cars are going in and out past the front of my house every day with the dirt and dust. Note, we own the road on the property. An easement was granted in the 1970s by a former owner. We are particularly concerned with the additional traffic and will pass across our property and the right-of-way established in the 1970s. The vineyard has two other roads which are just as accessible, and they could use them and impact they could leave us an impact on to us to a minimum. The hydrology report, the testing of our well, was somehow performed remotely. There is no way the testing could have taken place on the date cited. This is our only source of water, and we're extremely nervous with the large cannabis operation will leave us without water. We were never notified by the development department or the applicant. We received no notice of intent for the planning, the hearing, or any information about the appeal, except when I attended an Earth meeting, thanks to Jim and EJ. For running these meetings, I wish that I had known about them sooner. Us being the people most affected by the operation, we were not invited to the walkthrough. There were no concessions made by the county or the applicant for either improving the road or keeping us safe from crime, taking into account our health with added dust and dirt. There's a major concern with wildflowers with no egress and a narrow dirt road. We have concerns about the gate at the end of the paved road. Currently, there is a coded padlock, which is impossible to see in the dark. I think the owners put up the gate to create security, but running a large cannabis project will take major security. We are concerned for our own safety and the access to our property in the midst of all this activity. And what about the egress for possible wildflower up to 100 employees needing to get out on a congested, windy road? There is a school about a mile away from the gate with a very narrow, congested corridor where children across the stoplight at Highway 20 and High Valley Road. I can't imagine the additional traffic during harvest season. With my concerns, with most of the neighbours voicing their concerns and opposing this project, I can't believe that the plan to this project next to a residential area, when you consider that we have to go through with all the dust, the crime, the safety, the wildfire and concerns of health, and then the school a mile away. I ask you supervisors to please take into account that if this was in your backyard, would you be opposing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chambers before I go to Zoom? Sir?
I'm Terry Yelitz, and I would like to address 4 concerns. Number 1, water, which we've heard of, specifically potable water. If you talk to the water company, they're concerned with potable water. Number 2, I talk about people safety, both the adults who live in the High Valley area and who live in the Cerrito, Monte Vista area, as well as the kids who go to school down at the bottom where there is a very narrow congestion and a great deal of traffic. That's also a concern. Thirdly, I'd like to talk about agriculture in Lake County. We understand, I read the back of my tax envelope and it says we're supposed to be compliant. We like the smell, we like the pesticides, but you know, we also have some issues with what the agriculture does to the environment. And lastly, I'd like to talk about cannabis crime. And it's a known fact that cannabis grows need protection. Security has been already commented on, and I think that we need to think about it further. So potable water, and specifically potable water, is a real concern. If you've looked at the lake, we've had rains in the last couple weeks. If you listen to the Sacramento people, weather forecasters, they say there's nothing coming for the next 2 weeks. Maybe it's like last year when everything came in January, ended for the rest of the year. About the people in the school concerns, there's actually a sign down at the bottom of the hill that says large trucks aren't welcome. They don't do well on these curves. And if you looked at and have been up on the hill, and I know most of you have, but that Cerrito Road is deplorable, and it isn't the cars that are causing it, the light pickup trucks, it's the heavy-duty Monte Cristo needed support vehicles that are taking that road. There are potholes that are big, deep, and it's almost impossible to get up without hitting several of them. We're in a Lake County agricultural area. We don't have any other major resources, we understand that, but this agriculture, and specifically Monte Cristo now, and perhaps with its cannabis grow, should be producing tax dollars. Those tax dollars have not been used to repair the roads. They haven't been doing anything that is necessary, and the road is getting worse. It really is very, very insecure. Lastly, in my opinion, cannabis crime is something we ought to be asking about. The Monte Cristo trio here haven't told us what kind of AR-15 or what caliber or what kind of AK-47 their security people are going to be having. But I think we ought to be thinking about that because it's, as they've already pointed out, remote. It has had issues before with theft. It is something that is an attraction, not just to the people who grow it and sell it, but to the people who would like to steal it. I thank you for your time.
So I'm Olga Martin Steele. I am one of the property owners at 10750 Pingree Road, and I saw it, on the map. My main objection is water, and you've all heard it. We're in a drought. We don't really know how long this drought is going to go, but I think we're dealing with an uncertain groundwater table. No matter how I've heard it presented, I don't think we know. I don't think there's enough information. And when I hear the numbers of the projects that have been approved, that are being approved, that are in the queue, I really worry that we're not thinking through this whole drought situation that we're in. Now, we have a well, and we use it for ourselves, our own personal use, and there are other well owners that do the same. A little bit to help us fight a fire, God forbid, we have one. And we can't even have gardens because we let the wildlife run our property. So we don't do gardens. If we do, we're feeding them, basically. You're not supposed to bait wildlife, by the way. So we let them go natural. But my concern is, and I wouldn't have known except for the town hall meetings that I go to, I wouldn't have known about this project. I really wasn't paying attention to it. But I've been going to those meetings, And I wish that you could be there to hear what the neighbors have to say about this project. It's not this project, and it's not the lovely people that own it. You're very nice people, I know that. I was there at the visit too and really appreciated it. No, I think it's the future. It's the future of our water table. I think we ought to know more before we go forward with this project or any project. It's time to take a pause. That would be my recommendation, and really listen to the whole community. I know there are probably people that signed petitions that, you know, who knows, I don't know where they're all from, but a lot of people signed the petition. A lot of people showed up at the Planning Commission meeting. There were lots of letters. You have my letter. I'm on record, so you know what I've said. But I think we have an uncertain groundwater table, and I really urge you not to approve this project.
Hi, I'm Holly Harris, and Chuck is my husband. One thing he neglected to mention when he was up here, he said that we have the property that's one parcel. There's one other parcel between us and Monte Cristo, and they have been out of water since about 2015. Twice they've come down and tried to purchase water from us. The wells are going dry. Some of these wells are from people that don't want to come and tell you that they're going dry. As a matter of fact, some of them actually tapped into our well, you know, to use it. So anyway, they are going dry there. Then my other thing is about visibility. We live on the lake, and we had last year or 2 years ago an early activation project that was about 2 miles across from us on the lake. And all of a sudden one day, because we were not publicly noticed, one day everything started to become white. And we all started calling Lake County to find out what was going on. And it just kept getting whiter and whiter and whiter. And finally we found out it was a cannabis operation that none of us knew about. Now, even though we were 2 miles away, it is so visible and so glaring, and every day that you get up and you look at that white, you get angry. We were lucky because the project was approved, but one of the conditions that was put in would be there would be no hoop houses and no white plastic. Now, we are never going to see this project because we're below it, but I can guarantee you next year when it starts going up, if it becomes white, you're going to start getting phone calls from Windflower Point, from North Drive, from Clear Lake Rivieras, and from Buckingham, and they are not going to be happy at all. Anyway, that was it.
All right. I see some hands up on Zoom, so I'll go ahead and, okay, Sarah, come on up.
I imagine that there's a formality here that all the people in the chamber have to talk before Zoom, so.
There's not, it's basically my discretion.
People eager to talk? Anyway, I'll start, and then if it's possible, I'll come back. Hi, I'm Randy Wilk, and I'm the community and Firewise leader for our neighborhood of Clear Lake Oaks Hillside. I come here in opposition, obviously, and against this proposed large grow for Monte Cristo. I just don't think it's a good fit for our neighborhood, and many people here concur that already in the conversation. Just to give you an idea of our opposition numbers, because Olga sort of hit upon it initially, but I want to zone in on that. We have gathered 164 signatures on a petition. I could have gathered more. I could have probably got 400 easily, but I only spent a few weeks during the Planning Commission to do this, and I didn't have enough time. And I collected, or we have collected, sorry, I shouldn't say I, it's the neighborhood, has collected over 25 or more written letters. And then they rewrote the letters again for the Board of Supervisors, not just for the Planning Commission. I passed out a diagram. I'm sorry, it's so late. I have trouble with graphics.
This one?
Yeah, and you'll see there, and it's just a basic thing, but basically you'll see that 90% of our neighbors are opposing this. It's just based on the population and where it is in the zone of influence of this project, which is we consider it to be the gate. at the gate. This was a peaceful residence, basically, and it's starting to change already, even with the convoys of trucks that are coming in for the infrastructure. And I didn't understand if that's you need a pre-approval. Oh, that's fine. I just didn't understand if infrastructure was part of a pre-approval package. But anyway, kids used to play in the street and all that. I just want to remind people, this is a 10-year permit, for 22 acres. And this is possibly, I've seen other grows in other counties and in this county where this gets expanded to 100 acres. I'm not saying this will do it, but it's a possibility. I don't know if you know, I just heard a story, and it's actually true, is that this cannabis doesn't go to the domestic market. It goes and gets made into oil and then shipped illegally to Thailand.
No.
Could we stick with facts, please?
No, I'm just telling you, it's a 40,000 plants, and they're not growing it for people here for medical reasons or anything. I'll stop that. Anyway, a lot of people have already spoke about. Terry spoke about the school down the road there. That's an accident waiting to happen. We have no stoplight there, and then. To the point of, I forgot, Bruno said about, I don't know about Cerrito, but basically Cerrito has some curvy roads and it has a steep grade getting up. In fact, at the beginning of the Cerrito, we've had a couple trucks stall and one of the trucks caught on fire. And then it's very difficult for trucks to turn around if they got to the gate. They have to actually go through the property, through the applicant's property to get there. I come from a, Firewise point of view.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So we've seen you come before us many times for appeals, and I just have a question, Mr. Wilkes. Is there any appropriate cannabis project for your community?
Yes, ones that are not in neighborhoods. And if they're going to be in neighborhoods away from the neighborhood, but very small, 5 acres.
Okay. It's not technically in the...
And it has to be, if it's getting to get there, there's got to be great security, and I don't think people
Their
could
security
afford it.
is standard
Yeah, no,
requirements.
it's not acceptable, considering what Terry mentioned about, are they going to talk about the AK-47s
No,
and so on?
there's not going to be any of those. So I think there's a lot of misinformation here. I feel like you've mentioned before that you're not okay with any cannabis project in the whole area, and that
I'm okay with
and
it.
your group
I'm
would
okay
be
with it
appealing
in
every cannabis
I'm okay
project
with it in a remote area.
Randy,
Okay.
let her finish.
Okay.
I know that's come up in conversation before with this board, that, this group is in opposition to all cannabis projects in the area. And so I just wanted to ask that question, and thank you for your answer.
Thank you. I just want to
Randy,
clarify.
3 minutes is up, but I'll let you wrap up.
I'll
real
just
quick.
clarify. We have come to the conclusion the county really needs the money, right? And I believe cannabis is part of that package, but it needs to be in a rural area. And I've seen great projects where it's being planted in rural areas, and that's fine. In the neighborhood, no. I'll come up again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else in the chambers before I go to Zoom? And I'll go to Zoom. On the top there is Kaleem. If you can unmute, state your name for the record, your full name for the record, and we'll start at 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Kaleem Winata. I'm the resident of the Clear Lake Oak Hills. Just like the Dharmapalan, we've fallen up with, Clear Lake Oaks because of the view and the nature and also the community. But unlike Jacqueline G, I'm really sorry about the experience that you have. You feel like racism is the part of these opposition. I don't feel that way because, I go to the community, I attended Christmas party, and hear the problems that people have. And one of the things was like crime, like people got broken in. We sometimes don't lock our doors. And because of that, somebody got their things stolen. And with pot, which is a different kinds of, different than say wine, it will attract different kinds of people. And this, it's a known facts from investigator, reporter, Paige Johnson, St. John's from LA Times, and all this other stuff that we hear. And also, another thing is, we're so close to school. I don't know if you have seen school kids hanging out in our hills, and there are tons of kids, and especially with pots, with kids hear about pots, they probably will try to, go and do something, so I really don't want to have these in the neighborhood, especially, with, it's so close to the kids. So, and lastly, earlier I was listening to, when we have a hearing with the commissioner, 2 to 3, being two, two of the commissioners actually are related, in this pot-related business. Like I'm really should start looking into, like, what is this conflict of interest with people who are approving or had approved projects like this. So I think this is all I'm going to say. And also, like, the resources. Let's say, if this is approved, what kind of resources the county will provide in terms of, like, dealing with crimes, dealing with fire. Like what Randy said, we had one instances that the road was blocked, because truck on fire, and there's no egress, and we have 2 houses in the neighborhood got on fire, and it took like an hour for anybody to come and get the fire being put out. So these are the questions that I would like to have the commissioner think about.
All right. Next, we have Richard Deerham. If you'd like to unmute, state your name for the record, and we'll start your 3 minutes.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My name is Richard Durham. Yes, I've been in Lake County for about 31 years. I've attended many cannabis hearings, and I've never seen so many people come out with really fabricated fears. It's virtually impossible to steal cannabis nowadays. First of all, there's no incentive for anybody to come and do it because the value is now very low. And it would require a huge amount of people to try to steal it. It's just not a real thing. So I just want people to understand that it's not going to attract crime. That's not, try to plan a heist of a 20-acre cannabis farm. It's just not going to happen. On the other note, I've been a sailor on Clear Lake for over 20 years. And when I was up at Monte Cristo, I realized for 20 years I've been looking at that mountain, I never saw the vineyard. They have placed that so perfectly well that you can't even see a vine from the lake. It's wonderful. And if you walk the property, it's an absolutely beautiful place. One of the nicest places in Lake County, spectacular views. And they have been managing this property for, now 23 years in an excellent way. And I can't see them drop all these great habits to put up a shoddy cannabis operation. They've proven just by their applications, one of the best applications I've ever seen. So I totally recommend that the county should allow this to happen. For one important reason, I'm also a realtor, and the highest and best use of this property was grapes. Now that they have an opportunity to diversify, they're going to add value to their property. And they're not the only vineyard in Lake County who will probably end up with a cannabis grow on their property. It's an annual crop where grapes are perennial. And if need be, they could actually cease operations for a year if it was extreme drought where you couldn't with the grapes, you have to continue to water the grapes. And in the end, if if a party wants to sell a vineyard that is also diversified and has a cannabis license, it's going to be much more valuable. So for the rest of Lake County, other farmers, and Monte Cristo, I suggest that that well-planned project go for it. Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Maria Arroyo. If you can unmute, state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Jaime Arroyo. My wife is Maria. I just want to make a comment, probably the same comment I made in front of the planning commissioners, and this is going to the Board of Supervisors. I bought my property in Cerrito Drive about 6 years ago with the dreams and the plans of retiring. I'm going to live there. I'm in the process of doing that. I've been working hard on my property to fix it. And then I bought another property at the other lot next to it. Like I said, I have 2 properties now in Cerrito Drive and 2 by Highway 20 with the plans and dreams of retiring and live a happy life there. I didn't know anything about this cannabis business coming close, so close to me and to my family and to my grandkids. Like I told the commissioners, I want to ask the supervisors, what are the plans that are you planning to approve for Clear Lake Oaks? Because if you vote in favor of this, you're telling me that you're going to be approving not this only one, but the next one that is coming. Brassfield, Cache Creek, all those vineyards. I'm sure that they're going to be dedicating some other acres to grow cannabis. So for those reasons, I want you to vote against this proposal from Monte Cristo, which I respect them a lot, and I thank them for all the permits that they go through in order to continue their business. Because I respect them and I expect the same thing back, respect and dignity to me and to all the owners of properties, neighbors, the people that live in Clear Lake Oaks. But when I saw one of those track-type tractors going down Cerrito Drive all the way to Highway 20, that told me that they were not showing any respect for the neighbors. I saw it with my own eyes. I couldn't take a picture with my phone because I didn't have it handy, by my side. But it was one of those type with the metal belts instead of tires. Those tractors that it should be moved on top of one of our truck in order to move it from point A to point B. So I don't know if they were, they knew about this, but I saw it going down the road, destroying the road more. So to the supervisors, I just want to tell you that when you vote, please think about climate change. I hope that droughts are not consistent with the past years. Think about the roads, safety and quality of our roads. And think about the residents' feelings and our opinions.
All right, sir, if you can wrap up, your 3 minutes is up.
Yes, and like I said, I'm preparing my house in Cerrito Drive and the lot next to it for me to move back with my family, with my grandkids, and have a happy life and fulfill my dreams like Monte Cristo did for so many years.
All right.
So please, Board of Supervisors, give me that option. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Redbud Audubon. If you would like to unmute, and we'll start your 3 minutes once you state your name for the record.
Hello, this is Donna Makowitz from Redbud Audubon, and I'm also a resident of the Clear Lake Oak Keys. Just a couple of observations. I see that the biological study was done on December 29th in 2020, and I see that the westernmost conversion to the cannabis is closer to the known monitoring of where the spotted owl's habitat is. And I didn't know if that was noted on the database. Since it's cannabis and there's been no real concrete studies, the only thing I've seen is from Phoebe Parker Shames. We don't really know what the effect of cannabis is on our wildlife population. That's one thing. So I'm sure there must have been a springtime biological survey done, but I just didn't see that in the report. And a couple things Mr. Sherrill mentioned, the conversion is ag. I thought that cannabis is still considered not ag. And as the water is flowing down the hill, we have to remember that it's all coming down Schindler Creek. And we in the Keys are trying to restore and revitalize the Clear Lake and Schindler Creek. We don't need more sediment coming down the hills. Thinking of protecting as it flows out should have been considered also. Anything you can do to help the lake health is always appreciated. And that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And on Zoom, Nara Dalbaka, if you would unmute, state your name for the record.
Hello, Nara Dalbaka, resident of District 1 and expert in cannabis policy and land use. You know, I think that the supervisors, you all characterized this pretty well this morning in saying like this, had there been a full planning commission at the day of the hearing, then this project would have gone through and the neighbors would have been forced to appeal an approved project, you know, that did receive a 2/3 vote at the Planning Commission the day it was there, but still came through as a denial. So I do appreciate that you're understanding that nuance with this project. Jackie and Jonathan have been in Lake County longer than a lot of folks here, and have been incredible stewards of that parcel. I don't think there's any reason to think that the fact that they farmed grapes there for 23 years, you know, in a sustainable manner, in a manner that protected the open space and native species that exist on the parcel near the lake. There's no reason to believe that they're going to do anything different with cannabis, particularly because cannabis is even more regulated than wine grapes are. And they've gone above and beyond what is required of vintners in Lake County again and again over these decades. I think they'll probably go above and beyond even the incredibly strict regulations that we've got for California cannabis. So I think this is compatible with the land use and the existing cannabis ordinance. And the setbacks are very far from all the neighbors. So I don't think they're going to have to deal with, you know, cannabis right on their doorstep, which you all thoughtfully did a very large setback for cannabis for that reason. So I think it's exciting that some of the vintners here are starting to lean into cannabis because it has been such a, it's been a little bit contentious at times. And I think that the fact that ag is starting to open up and understand that cannabis is just a plant that we're growing, that's a medicine for a lot of people, is starting to get a little bit more mainstream. So I can't wait for the right to farm to include cannabis. And I would love to see some of the other ag uses be as environmentally friendly as cannabis is. Thanks.
Thank you.
Somebody else try to testify.
They didn't swear in.
Yeah, yeah. All right. As for Zoom, I don't see any other hands up, so I see a gentleman standing up. And is there anyone that's new that would like to speak? Because after that, I would like to go back to, because Chuck, you wanted to finish, and then lastly, Randy. So, sir, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Hank Lesher, and I own 50 acres up there on El Cerrito Drive, and my parcel is surrounded on 3 sides by the Dharma Paulins Monte Cristo Vineyard. And they've been my neighbor for 23 years, and they have just been excellent neighbors. And I just want to testify to that fact. And El Cerrito Drive, when you get to their property, the maintenance of El Cerrito Drive by the county completely stops. And that road for the next mile all the way to their house has been maintained by the Dharma Paulins. And I think that, that's that's really fantastic boon for all of the people who have properties along that road. And it's a very nice thing that they've been doing for us for the last 23 years. And also, I would mention that with Ordinance 4290, that actually requires them to improve the road even more and put road base down. And so if there has been dust, they're going to have to even mitigate that more than what has been in the past while they've been operating the vineyard. So by virtue of passing this use permit, we would actually be increasing that improvement of mitigating the dust. And I have to go back to the water thing because, you know, it's like Bruno said, you know, this is one of the first projects that he's ever seen that has actually had somebody say, well, I will give up, I'll trade off a big section of crop that uses water in order to have no actual net water increase. And so many of the people complaining talk about the water, but actually these people are going to be using, not increasing the amount of water usage whatsoever. So I think that totally mitigates all of our concerns, the people's concerns about water. They're speaking about water in general, and they're speaking about not having pot in general. And that's what a lot of the complaints are. I'll just wrap it up with saying that the roads and the fire, I'm sorry, the roads and the water, I think, are the two main things that have been totally improved by these folks instead of being complicated and made worse. Thank you.
Thank you.
As a clarification, my comment was that their drought management plan allows for a decrease in the cultivation of cannabis, not speaking specific to their vineyards. Just wanted to clarify.
Ma'am.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Smith. Cannabis is polarizing. We know this. And it's important to remember that we're talking about a plant and an agricultural crop, and that there's an evolution of time, and opinions change. And some people become very entrenched in their opinions on both sides of any subject. I think what we're hearing today is a lot of concerns that are also wrapped in a lot of hyperbole and a lot of misinformation. There are no AK-47s. Is that even a thing? There are no automatic assault rifles. We're not even allowed to have guns on our farms. And I think that's very important to note, because no licensed farm is going to risk their license over having guns or attack dogs or all of these things that we see in movies that just aren't true. And I will not quote the sheriff, but the sheriff has made comments that say, and paraphrasing, that the illegal activity, the theft that does occur is not occurring on licensed farms. And I think that's a very clear distinction that needs to be made. Lake County's security measures are stronger than the state's requirements. The state does not require any cameras or any security systems in place, but Lake County does. So we're actually more restrictive here and concerned and protective of our environments. I've been a licensed cannabis farmer here since 2018. Trust me, no thief wants to come to my farm when I can pick up the phone and call the sheriff. They want to go to the hinterlands and they want to steal from people who are illegally cultivating. So I would like to put that to rest. I think it's very inappropriate to judge one project based on the failings of other projects or on the what-ifs of other projects, because there have been challenges with other projects in the county, in the state, in their neighborhood. This project should not be judged because of those failings. The Darmapanians have proven themselves to be stewards of the land. If you've been there, you know that you wouldn't have known there was a vineyard there. They're very conscientious of the environment. They're very conscious of the surroundings. The setbacks that they have created for their neighbors go above and beyond what is required. We talk about people having moved there and not knowing there was going to be a pot farm there. Well, again, it's a plant. It's an agriculturally zoned property. The use for which they are applying for is an approved use for their property. And it's like buying a property next to a golf course or buying a property next to a farm. You know what you're getting into, and you've made that decision. From a paramilitary standpoint, we always talk about change in conditions. If there's a change in conditions, let us know, and that's when we have to make changes. There are no change in conditions. We're actually using less water. There's a shift in the demand on the road because they're shifting the labor force timeliness, right? There's going to be less in September, maybe a little more in November. I will wrap this up. Again, we talked about fit for a neighborhood, and I think that's really just a personal morality issue. Again, as I always say, I want all cannabis projects to be judged on the merits of the project and the appropriability of the zoning. So let's move forward with knowing that this is an appropriately zoned project. It fits the parameters, and continue to move Lake County forward. Thanks.
Thank you. And so with that, Chuck, if you wanted to go, put up a minute for you to finish wrapping up what you wanted to wrap up earlier. Why don't you state your name for the record?
I'm Chuck Lamb from Clear Lake Oaks.
All right.
I wanted to talk about the wildfire issues, okay? Supervisor Green brought up page 32 of the initial study. I looked at that as well. Here it is, okay? And if you look at this, page 32, and the section is entitled Wildfire. There are 4 categorical boxes that are checked off. And the interesting thing is that if they're checked off, meaning that the risks are less than significant, so therefore mitigation is not needed. That's what it means. Essentially, that flies in the face of what Chief Mike says right here in his letter to the board. In his letter to the board, and it's in your packet, he states the improvements, the upgrades that are going to be necessary in this project for them to comply with the California State Fire Code. And, from an infrastructure standpoint, he's talking about hydrants, he's talking about sprinklers, he's talking about alarms and so forth.
Chuck, if we can.
There's a lot that needs to be done on this project. He then goes on to say, to do so is going to require that the applicant pay mitigation fees to the tune of just south of $1 million, $970,000. What does that say? It underscores the risks involved from a wildfire standpoint. Chief Mike says this is a severe high fire risk area. I'm concerned about that. I don't live up there, but if I were these folks, I'd be really concerned about that.
Thanks, Chuck. Your minute is elapsed. Yes, yeah.
What?
Yeah, your minute's lapsed.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for that point. And I know that, Jim, did you want to come up and?
Yeah, did you want to go first? Oh, go ahead. I didn't quite finish with a couple of points. I missed over them. I forgot them. Anyway, we're talking about the 3 cumulative effects factors in Lake County. 2 of them have already bit us, and one of them is the lake. And so the lake has gone south on us, and now we're spending millions of dollars trying to restore the wetland. And then the other one is fire. Everybody knows about the fires. They didn't understand about, fire ecology, that sort of thing. And the third one is a statewide problem, not just here, and that's groundwater. And this is a special kind of groundwater here because it's a intercoastal range groundwater, and there's, I have personally, when I was on the board and before that and after it, I've heard people tell me about their dry wells. I said, why don't you put that on the record so that people will know about that? We understand that wells are going dry. And the reason they don't want to diminish their property values. So they don't say anything. A lot of times what they'll do is try to go through until the wells kind of come back, or they'll have water shipped in, or they will sell the property and then get out as soon as the water comes back into the well. And whatever it is, there are dry wells, and so there's something to look at on this dry water. One of the things that causes that is conal depression and overpumping, that sort of thing, and a slow transfer of water through the type of substrate. There's also a lowering of the water level in particular types of wells, but there's three types of aquifers that we have to look at. It's the alluvial plain aquifer and the volcanic field aquifer and the fractured rock aquifer, which this one is, and it's the least known aquifer of all of them within this coastal range and a coastal range type of water regime,
Jim, if we could
and it's
wrap
the
up.
least that can be known. Thanks. One more thing to say, and that is it's very difficult to know anything about fractured rock aquifers from just wells. It's one of the things that really has a problem with being studied. I don't want us to be in the same kind of situation for cumulative impacts on wells and groundwater. So notwithstanding, they are in the area that has the most types or overdrawn groundwater in the entire Lake County. That's in that High Valley area. And from two of the three of those that I mentioned, and the third one is the fractured rock aquifer, which nobody knows anything about. So, thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Randy.
Okay, tall order here, going after Jim. I'm going to get to more, just very succinct points here. I notice a situation where there's not enough due diligence going on here specific to specific items in the conversation of this hearing, and I believe this should go back to either the supervisors or the development department. The reasons I say that is in one of the public records, page 56, Gordon mentions, make sure they have legal access for the type of operation that they're doing, and that implies that it's not overburdening their easement that they've been granted by another owner. That's something that's really important to look at. If you guys don't go through that, I think you have problems with some pretty big lawsuits. The second thing is I think this should go back to the development department because standards. The standards have changed in the development department to be much more, they did one thing, they went through drought management, which is great, but there are other standards that are missing here that they've just acquired onto this.
Randy, if we could wrap up.
Okay. And then the other thing is, actually Suris, I guess I'm hallucinating, but Suris, the farm that got voted down, they actually had AK-47s to guard their thing. So people really understand that it was a reality, not a hallucination. Just to let you know, they were guarding it with that. So that's where people were getting the ideas.
Randy, that you went over your minute, everybody,
Okay.
you know. So
Did I get to talk about Ken?
that's what I gave you the opportunity for.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
you said you gave me 1 minute for me and 2 minutes for Ken.
No, I said you would have the opportunity to speak afterwards for them briefly because we had their document on file.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, you can be the last one. It's 1 minute.
Less than that. I just wanted to say that right now, Hank Lesher again, right now the Monte Cristo Vineyards can use as much water as they want to. But once you pass this use permit, then they will be able to be monitored and they will also be able to be regulated. And so the actual, once again, the water situation is going to be mitigated and improved upon by virtue of passing this use permit. Thank you.
All right. With that, at this time, we'll close public input, come back to the board. I didn't know if you wanted to do questions or ask them questions?
I wanted to make a quick comment rather
ahead,
than a
Supervisor.
question. I read the Chief Ciancio letter as well, and that one kind of blew my mind, $1 million, and that's because they're using the actual cultivation area per square foot. Mitigation fees are only for buildings. I believe there's a 6,000 square foot building and maybe some ancillary buildings that they may have to pay mitigation fees, but that might be under $10,000 because I don't think, maybe a little bit more depending on the greenhouses, but the overall cultivation site is outdoor and there is no mitigation fees on outdoor grows. It's only for buildings based on our code for mitigation fire fees. So I saw that as well. I just wanted to clarify that that is definitely not correct. I'm sure that Chief Ciencio would love to have that in his budget, and I wish him the best in finding ways to get that, but that would not come from this project.
Are we
Vice Chair Pais.
deliberating now?
What's that?
Are we deliberating now?
Oh, no, I was going to see if there's any addressing some of the comments. I didn't know if anyone wanted to do that, or if the appellant wanted to do so. If there's anything you wanted to end with.
Yeah, I did want to just go back. It's been stated by others.
Brief as well. If we
Yeah, I'll be very brief about it. It's just that Richard Durham mentioned it. Perennial plants such as vines or orchards, you can't not water. If we don't get another drop of water for the rest of the year, they're still going to have to water the vineyards this coming year. Whereas cannabis, if the wells are going dry, then you take a couple years off. You just don't have to keep those plants alive. And I think that Mr. Still mentioned is like a management of county resources, and I think that encouraging conversions from perennial crops such as vineyards and orchards to annual crops such as lettuce, such as cannabis, such as tomatoes and things of that nature would be advantageous as we go through drought-related or climate change-related droughts in the future.
Thanks. All right. Did you have anything else, or did we?
Nothing to add. I think you have all the facts before you. Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can I clarify one other item too, just because it came up? The easement was checked to ensure there wasn't any prohibition for this use. And then, yeah, everything else has been covered.
All right. With that, we'll bring it to the board and see where we're, did you have any statements? Anybody else have any questions? Vice Chair?
Yeah, I have some comments. I think just which was just recently brought up is that this conversion from a vine crop to an annual crop does give the flexibility that we don't see in other places, in other vineyards and orchards, to adjust to drought conditions. So I think that's really important. I think it's the drought management plan is what we need to see going forward to be able to adjust with where our resources are. And, you know, and I want to say give you comfort in the community, but know that this can be adjusted with an annual crop rather than committed to keeping vines alive no matter what amount of rainfall that we get on an annual basis. I think you've demonstrated in the 23 years really being considerate neighbors, and I think you're the characters that we would like to continue to see in our county with the work that and the dedication and the sustainability and taking great pains to honor the land and the native species. I think it says a lot about what you've already accomplished, and I think there is an opportunity here for us in the county. We have had so many conversations about wine grapes and cannabis and terrapins, and here we have an opportunity where we're going to have on one property both crops growing simultaneously and together, and we can really study that if this goes through and if you would allow, because that is part of the conversation, a circular conversation that we get stuck in a lot. We don't know. And I did visit the property, and you did say that your wine grape buyers are completely fine with this. And I think that speaks volumes too. So I think this is exciting to see how this will play out. And I don't want to miss the opportunity to point to that because we've had so many conversations about cannabis and wine grapes. And so I want to bring that up. I think there's a lot of concern in the community just about cannabis in general and what that looks like. And I do want to say this is not in a neighborhood. This is not in a community growth boundary. This is, there are neighbors that live around, but we're not talking about being inside a neighborhood. Kids are not going to be playing anywhere near where this operation is. And The fire breaks, I mean, I would love to have a fire break like this near my house and near my property, because I did lose my home in a fire, and I know what happens when fires move, when wind-driven fires move quickly and the resources aren't there, and going out and visiting your property and the work that you've done with the fuel crews provides an incredible amount of buffer and safety for the community of Clear Lake Oaks. And you know, and dare I say, they would be lucky to have you there, because that is what we strive for. We want to have those buffers around our communities to protect them from wildfire. So I think you've done that well. And let's see. Oh, and there was another concern about, well, I'll just say, each project is studied individually, and there is no blanket exception of all projects. Every project must meet the criteria. Every project must go through the process. So this isn't just a green light for all cannabis projects. Every project is studied individually. And for the caller that was concerned about that, you should know that we have all of these processes in place to prevent that from happening. So we have a process. A lot of you have been through that with the Planning Commission, and here we are today. And there was another comment about unwanted growth. And our county's going to grow. And it is our job to make sure that we grow in the way that serves all of us the best. And we may not always agree with what that growth looks like, but we cannot stop it. We cannot prevent it. We are going to grow. We need to grow. And having these conversations and hearing from the public is an important part of that. So, you know, it might be an opinion that you don't want to grow in this way, but I think that there are benefits that we're going to see when we start thinking outside the box and look at ways that we're going to grow that we might not expect.
Supervisor Green?
No, go ahead.
Well, thank you to everyone who showed up. I do appreciate community input, pro, con. It's always good to participate in the process. Cannabis is a plant. Cannabis cultivation is agriculture. Cannabis is an agricultural product. It may be news to some. It may not be welcome news to some, but that is the state of the law in California, and it's the state of the law here in Lake County. And I think we need to proceed on that basis and with that understanding. Having served a little time on the Planning Commission in Lakeport, in hearings like this is quasi-judicial. We are bound to consider the evidence as it's presented in the initial study, and all the documents have been presented to us to listen to the concerns of those present. I have read all the letters, and I have a little checklist here of those that were presented in writing and those that were presented orally. All of the concerns that have been expressed here have been covered in the initial study. The initial study recommends a mitigated think tank, if I'm correct. And concerns by themselves are not substantial evidence, right? So how are we to weigh this? You know, the incredible amount of documentation that we require of our cannabis growers, large and small, or the concerns, some of which don't even address the subject property, some of which address a school 2+ miles away, some of which address a hairpin turn where the truck's jackknife going up High Valley Road, not going up to this farm property. You know, we are bound to weigh the four corners of this proposal as it is presented, not as we wish it to be. So despite the invitation to consider the possible potential impacts of off-site wells, the cumulative impacts of cannabis cultivation in the county as a whole, personally, I must decline that invitation. That's not what is before us today. We may want to come back another day and talk about our drought and our cumulative impacts of agriculture in general, but I was stricken by the comments that are most critical of this are not from other farmers, it's from people who live in rural areas in a residential mode, who have some agricultural rights of their own, but based on the topography or their own desires, choose not to exercise those rights. I'm so concerned about everything I've heard here today and its potential impact, not just on future cannabis applicants, but on agriculture generally. If there's one precedent, I applaud you for doing this, to cut back your current production so you come up with this revenue neutral, water neutral thing. But now I'm thinking of a cottage grow, a type 2, with a smaller footprint. And I wonder if that's the new precedent we're going to have to set now. Like, okay, you can grow weed now on your small cottage farm, but you're going to have to give something up in exchange. And their offer to do so isn't even satisfactory to the people assembled here. So what do they get for offering to take productive vineyards out of production? They still get hammered for it. Nothing I've heard here today in the written or oral testimony rises to the level of substantial evidence that, to me, would overcome the recommendation of staff to approve the appeal. Thank you.
Supervisor Simon, did you, yeah, I think you were first, and then Supervisor Sabatier.
All right. Yeah, well said, Supervisor Green. As we said here, and Supervisor Peiskopf, who made this, and I've said this multiple times, that each one of these projects that comes before us is an individual project as we look through where they fit in Lake County. I've also made the comment that there are some folks that want to grow in Lake County that will never be able to grow in Lake County. I think one of those names was brought up earlier about a project that was denied by this board. This is something we've been talking about since with the approval. It'll take 5 to 6 years to really get this thing right and what it looks like in Lake County as a new industry. I think this board has heard concerns at multiple hearings that I've sat on in my 6 years here. We have the Cannabis Task Force that we're looking to try and streamline and make changes to make sure we're making those changes. There were some comments today about the hydrologist reports being back in the county. I think all those conversations are happening as we're doing this. But I've also made the comments many a times that we are looking for those good partners that will do the right things here in Lake County. I don't know you for 22 years or 23 years. I guess I may be the only board member, I don't know if it's Green, that went out and looked at your project. I knew this was eventually coming, but I did not take a tour visit out there. I read all the information that was presented to me that came through on the Board of Supervisors information packet. But from my point of view, these are the type of projects we need to be looking at. It was also made a comment that, did we understand that this is a 10-year use permit? Yes, I do understand that every time we make this decision. But this is a new industry, and the partnership being made between our legal cannabis growers and the county is, listen, we're going to get this data hopefully as we're going forward and understand this industry as it grows, but also understand that with that use permit, there is a revocation opportunity there for the county. That, we're early on in this industry, but I myself have sat right here and say enforcement of, getting rid of illegal grows, eradicating those needs to always be a focus, but also making sure the folks that have got these use permits in the county are doing the right thing, which you sat right here and testified on camera, which is this is what we're going to do, that we both hold up our sides of the agreement, of make an agreement if that's what the board does, and then our cultivators and the folks bringing this industry into the legal light do the same. I really reference that to, a lot of the pushback we got when we first got into the gaming industry on the tribal side. We heard the same arguments, drugs, alcohol, illegal, not good for the communities, going to destroy it. Well, it's 28 years later now, and I think, the gaming industry in California has done a good job at least moving forward with that, both with mitigating issues and other things, and I still say this industry kind of pairs to that likeness. So today, I listened to both sides, obviously, and prepared to move forward in a positive manner today. So I'll be ready to do that when we move, unless someone else is.
No, I just know Supervisor Spatier had another statement.
So I brought up earlier that I'd like to see the drought management plan added to the conditions of approval, or else what's the purpose of the drought management plan? And then I think it comes down to two things, and that's the road and water. And the road, I hope that we will recognize the issues of this community when we get our 5-year plan. And it appears to me, when I've been there, that it's been the 5-year road plan.
Yeah, we need to make sure, because it's not on there.
And I think we just need to remember this conversation, because this community looks like it's been neglected from having an update on that road system, and I sure hope that they get it.
I just checked the map, and yeah, we need to add it.
But when it comes back, we can make those kinds of comments. So that's one. And second is water. And I am not going to throw out a comment that I think is very real, and that is that we don't truly know how much water there is. We don't. And that is definitely a concern. I appreciate that the applicants have provided a kind of a strategic plan for what to do during drought. And in listening to the comments, crime, not worried about. Yes, the sheriff definitely made comments related to legal grows. We don't have a problem. Illegal grows, we have a problem. AK-47s, I don't think you're allowed to buy Russian material anyways, so I don't think that's a problem. But the only issues are, to me, the road, we could discuss that later, and water. Just for discussion, just because we truly don't know, what if because we have the ability to change, not the project necessarily, I think we can, but that's would be ridiculous without further studies. But what if we added stuff to the drought management plan? There is exceptional drought, there is extreme drought, there is severe drought, there is moderate drought. What if we just kind of looked at 5 acres, 7 acres, something along those lines, which that way if it reduces, we're asking you to reduce yet again, rather than just the number that you provided at 14 acres. This way we can at least try and make sure that we don't go oops. You don't want the oops. So that's one of the things that if the board is willing to discuss, of looking at the drought management plan, and I hate to pick on you for the case that you've actually created what I think is, thank you for a good drought management plan, that you're recognizing this is a perennial. You don't have to do like a vineyard where you're going to have 128 acres next year. You can choose to kind of grow and shrink based on the climate that we have and the current drought status. And so if that's something that the board is interested in looking at, I'm interested in that. I think that gives a little bit to the public's fears and the public's concerns. And again, let's be real, we just don't know. But I love the idea of the zero balance, the zero-sum game of taking away 40 acres, now potentially another 18, so now it's taking away 58, and then only adding a potential of maximum of 22 acres, which they can't expand unless they get an approval. This is the limit that they have. So just putting it out there, just to see if that's a bit of a compromise between some of the concerns that I think can be potentially real, and what we've been proposed today with the actual project proposal.
Supervisor Green, then Supervisor Pyska.
I can just speak for myself. Not interested in that. The ordinance is what the ordinance is. You want to bring the ordinance back, we can kick it around, and certainly welcome that at a later date, because there's some stuff that needs to get kicked. Okay with the idea of taking the drought management plan as it was submitted and making it a project condition of approval. That seems appropriate.
Yep, and I know we've discussed having thresholds for different levels of drought, but it's not in the ordinance, and I don't think that it's appropriate to try and quantify that on the fly today. It's not something that they've been asked to do in the past, and what they have done, I think, provides a great deal of flexibility going in the crop conversion.
Supervisor Simon?
And I'm in agreement with adding the drought mitigation plan as part of the use permit, but that's as far as I'm willing to go today. So in agreement with the first request, but yeah.
I think everyone spoke, so I'll finish off, and I'll just beg Maria and Byron to just give me a break in my district. No, all jokes aside, these issues are very controversial, and in my town halls, as you all know, I have 3 of them, and in many of them, and both of them, especially the bordering Worth and Earth, there's a lot of discussion about cannabis and how it affects the water. And I know that in visiting, I seen a lot of the proposals and the mitigations that are talked about and presented into possibly the conditions of approval. And I understand the concerns about the drought and lack of water. The real culprit is the drought in general, the Mother Earth, Mother Nature. We're forced to be resilient and conservatory. I think that a lot of the information that's been brought from the public, as I've heard similarly in the Earth meetings, is us as a county having some sort of inconsistencies at times. But that goes back, I want to say it goes back to 2019, 2020. And so a lot of times we're getting better now that we have a little more stability. But I know that in some instances, when we talk about the hydrology reports, I know that's probably something that we'll talk about at a later date or whatever the case may be. I like the idea of taking that away and not having it so controversial or putting a burden on the situation that we're dealing with in front of us. Having something outside is something that, anything that can alleviate some of that division is something I always look towards. Illicit grows, I think, is the main culprit of everything, is the elephant in the room. I think at times legal grows get the brunt of it because there's an opportunity to speak on it. I know at RCRC we're talking about, I actually will give a report about some of the policies that we've put forward from the Ad Hoc Committee for Cannabis, and that is to request that the state put more emphasis and resources towards illicit grows. But either or, it's still an issue in my district, regardless when it comes to cannabis. And so, yeah, it's a very slippery slope when it comes to this stuff. So, yeah, I know that commonly, you know where I always stand in things like this. I always vote with the community. So that's just where I'm at. So, but it's in my district. So if someone wants to make a motion either way, Ms. Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder, I'm sure your board remembers this, but this is a de novo proceeding. So you will be also looking at the adoption of the mitigated neg deck as well as the approval of the major use permit. And although the findings, which often appear in your staff memo, aren't there this time, if you refer to the staff memo to the Planning Commission beginning on page 23, you'll see those findings and you can simply make reference to those. If you determine to grant the appeal, approve the major use permit, and adopt a mitigated neg deck.
So 2 motions?
2 motions and then your determination as to granting or denying the appeal. From the conversation, it's my indication that it will be to grant the appeal. So as I said, the Planning Commission staff memo, if you look at page 23 of that, the findings necessary for the adoption of the mitigated neg deck, I think you can simply adopt the mitigated neg deck and based upon those findings and just make reference to the document and then approve the major use permit, which are the findings under 51.4 of the zoning ordinance.
When the motion happens, there were 2 things we talked about. One was correcting a ministerial error in the IS, and the other was adding the project conditions of approval. So
and that would
where would those go in the motions?
If you grant the appeal, you'll grant the appeal subject to the changes that your board wishes to see.
And did I hear the chair inviting a motion?
Someone's got there.
One quick comment, I just want to thank Mr. Amelong. I did look, and thank you for catching this, to make sure that we had every single document. The one that we had was from a December date or a later date. So it was pretty much verbatim the same letter, but resubmitted for that later date, and I appreciate you doing that. It's important that we have all documents in front of us.
All right.
I'll take a shot at this. I'll take my glasses. I move that the Board of Supervisors uphold the appeal AB 22-03, approving the mitigated negative declaration IS 21-15 and major use permit UP 21-14 for Monte Cristo Vineyards LLC on the properties located at 11250 Cerrito Drive, Clear Lake Oaks, California, APN 006-007-17-23 and -30, subject to the clerical correction to the initial study and the additional requirement that the drought management plan be made a project condition of approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Johanna, can you conduct the roll call, please?
Supervisor Simon?
Aye.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Green?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Crandall?
Nay.
Thank you.
And then there's one more.
Then I would recommend that you adopt by motion the mitigated negative declaration for the major use permit UP 21-14, based upon the findings that appear beginning on page 3 of staff's memo to the Planning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Johanna, conduct the roll call, please.
Supervisor Simon?
Aye.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Green?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Crandall?
Nay.
Thank you.
Mo-
Final motion, which would be to approve the major use permit 21-14. Having made all the findings that appear beginning on page 4 of the staff memo to the Planning Commission for this project.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Johanna, conduct the roll call, please.
Supervisor Simon?
Aye.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Green?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Crandall?
Nay.
Thank you.
All right, is that the last one? All right, with that, motion carries on all three motions, 4-1. Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the presentation in general. Thank you for your comments to the public. We are going to go into closed session next.
Thank you.
What's that?
Don't we have one more?
No, but we have to go into closed session for one of the items on here. Let's see, it
So it's
is
fine.
8
Chair?
point, I think it's one of the.
8.2.
8.2.
I recommend that
Yeah.
to the board that we go into closed session for 8.2, come back out of closed session, take care of 7.1 and 7.3 in the public meeting, and then go back into closed session for the evaluation.
Okay.
Go into closed session for 8.2. I'll read it off. I should read it off briefly, shouldn't I?
I made a note to myself.
No, we got to do this one first because Kathy can only do this at this time. Yeah, yeah.
I forgot.
All right, so I should read it off briefly. It's closed session item 8.2, conference with legal counsel, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2E1, one potential case. With that, we'll go into closed session.
13.